3D tree models consist of mesh and texture. Better assets have a higher resolution texture and a higher density mesh. But even if we take the highest resolution displacement map and ignore the fact that this tree isn't practical because of millions of polygons, we can't get anything more than a slightly more detailed, repetitive bark of the tree. But in reality, a tree is not just bark. If we look at a tree up close, we see multiple layers of bark, knots, twigs, leaves, moss, mushrooms, ivy, and so on, and that's just on the trunk. If we go back to the CG tree, we can easily conclude that the method used by add-ons, assets and 3D models that you can find on the market is limited. Displacement cannot create these details. So I decided to test a different method, and this is the result. An incredibly detailed, easy to calculate and fully procedural CG tree. But what is behind this? The asset pack I created includes 38 trees. We can look at it as an empty tree base. Each of these trees has 4 modifiers. The first 3 are for animation, the fourth and the most important one is the geometry nodes modifier. Geometry nodes modifier connects to a base of 69 photoscanned parts of the tree that we can easily distribute to the empty trees. Photoscanned objects are various types of bark, moss, twigs, knots, mushrooms, buds, ivy, to details that go to the branches such as pine cones, fruits, branches, leaves, etc. Almost everything a tree can contain. We can easily distribute these objects to the empty base of the tree with the sliders in the modifier tab. The result is an incredibly detailed and realistic tree that is fully controlled with sliders. But how is it possible that such a dense mesh loads quickly? Photoscanned objects or particles are linked, which means that they are not in the current Blender file. Blender links them from the Blender files downloaded with the asset package. If we import a tree into our scene as a link object, our scene can have hundreds of trees, but our file is always about 1 MB in size. So we import the tree as a link, and the tree imports the photoscanned object as a link. This way, nothing is stored in our Blender file, no matter how much detail we add to the tree. This not only saves memory, but also significantly speeds up the viewport and render. All information such as mesh, textures, vertex group, shaders, modifiers, etc. are still stored in the other Blender files. But if the object is linked, we cannot edit it or even move it. Actually we can. The library override option in Blender exists just for that reason. With the library override option, we can override some values from the original Blender file. For example, change the transform data or manage with the geometry nodes modifier. All information is still stored in link files, but Blender allows us to override some values from the current file. More in the windowing structure that comes with the asset pack. The asset package has been tested and works well on this computer, but let's see how the photoscanned objects were created. After visiting forests and other locations and collecting biomes, it was time to turn all this into 3D models. Given that these are organic objects, often very thin, small and half transparent objects such as leaves, it is recommended to have a professional scanner, because the objects we scan are quite challenging to scan with a mobile phone. Fortunately, I own one of the best devices on the market, the Creality Raptor. Raptor is the world's first hybrid scanner, includes 2 scanning modes. Infrared scanning mode for larger targets such as faces, bodies and sculptures, and blue light scanning mode for scanning smaller objects, starting from 5 mm. Unlike infrared mode, Blue light mode requires markers. Rotating base is recommended so that we don't have to circle around the object. Soft uniform lighting from all sides is essential for photo scanning. I decided for the living room because of practicality. It is not ideal, but it is not bad either, because I have a lot of natural light on three sides, and I placed these two soft boxes on the side where there is a less light. Raptor has its own software that is very easy to use. You watch the scanning process on the monitor, and the scanner suggests in red which parts you need to repeat, and the lights on the device suggest the ideal distance from the object. If you were to take, for example, this pine cone and try to model it in Blender, the process would look something like this. You should know from modeling techniques, texturing, UV unwrapping, modifiers and so on. With Raptor, it is enough to rotate this chair 2 times and we have a super detailed 3D model in about 1 minute. Of course, we don't need this many details and it would slow down the Blender unnecessarily. Depending on the model, I deleted between 98 and 99% of the mesh and still kept a detailed model with about 5000 polygons per object. So the models I share with you have only about 1 and 2% of the mesh we got from the Raptor, and that's enough. My favorite option in Creality software is merging 2 scans into one object. First you need to scan one side, then turn the object to other side and make a new scan. After that, the software tries to automatically connect 2 meshes into one. If you are not satisfied with the result, you can manually find 3 same points on 2 scans and help the software to connect 2 sides correctly. And we have a super realistic pine cone. Or if you don't want too complicated things, you can do something like this. Now that we have photoscanned objects, we need a way to distribute them to the trees. The best option is geometry nodes. Node setup looks very complicated, but there are a lot of the same things that are repeated. It is mainly based on distribute points on faces, instances on points, and the options that go with them. Each tree is divided by vertex group to have more control later. All this was repeated 69 times and joined with join geometry. This part refers to the displacement option, where we control the density of the mesh, the thickness of the mesh, and the part of the tree where we want the effect. This is the option I criticized at the beginning of this video. The tree is now more detailed, but harder to calculate and not as detailed as with photoscanned particles. A low poly tree sometimes need more details. Adding one subdivision is useful, but I wouldn't recommend more than that, rather add particles. There are also options for quickly adding snow and leaves, as well as changing the season or leaf color. The leaves added with this button are not photoscanned, but within Geometry Node modifier we also have photoscanned leaves, so we can combine them or keep one of the options. This leaves uses a shader that have 2 different sizes, as well as an option to change the season. To achieve this, it was necessary to take photo of each leaf from 2 sides, plus several leaf season and combine it into one shader. In short, a lot of work to make everything work, but we can talk about that in another video. There are also 3 modifiers for animation. The default settings are for light animation, but they can be adjusted as needed. Thanks for watching. You can find the asset pack in the links below, along with the detailed instructions.